Doing this will make your Jeep 3.6 Pentastar engine run like new again. If your Jeep's 3.6 Pentastar feels rough, sluggish, or just plain tired, the engine itself might not be the problem. The fix comes down to a few things most owners completely overlook. Get them right, and your Pentastar can idle smoother, pull harder, and feel years younger. Ignore them, and a $20 problem can turn into a $4,000 engine repair. Start with the oil, because it's a moving part in here. Owners treat oil as the stuff that stops metal grinding itself apart. In this engine, it's also hydraulic fluid. The cam phasers that swing your valve timing run purely on oil pressure, and so do the lash adjusters under every rocker arm. So when your oil goes thin, dirty, or low, this engine physically can't hold its own timing. Why does that matter? Because code P0016, the timing correlation code, gets pinned on a stretched chain almost every time, and that job runs past $1,500. Low, dirty, or wrong weight oil throws the exact same code for free. Your manual gives a spec, and that spec isn't a friendly suggestion. Most JK Wranglers and older Grand Cherokees want 5W20 meeting Chrysler standard MS6395, while the JL wants 0W20. A JK holds 6 quarts, and the JL holds 5. So hold on to that, because Chrysler will use it against owners later. If you tow, crawl, idle, or run short trips, 5,000 miles is your number. Skip that, and your Jeep quietly compensates for you, right up until the idle starts hunting at every stop sign. Cleaning the throttle body is only half of that 20-minute job. Carbon builds on the inside edge of your throttle body over the years, narrowing the opening your engine computer expects. So the idle wanders, the throttle hesitates off the line, and the whole truck starts feeling tired. Why does the cleaning make it worse? Your computer spent years learning to work around that dirty bore, and it got good at it. Wipe the carbon away, and those values are wrong. So the idle surges, and people assume they broke something. Turn the key to run without starting, wait 15 seconds, switch it off, then repeat that twice. Now start it, let it idle for 5 to 10 minutes without touching the pedal, then drive gently for a few miles. That's the whole relearn. Skip it, and you'll be back at a shop paying to be told your throttle body is fine. While you're in there, reset the oil change indicator the dealer way. With the key on, press the accelerator to the floor 3 times inside 10 seconds, then switch it off. And your engine computer isn't the only brain in that Jeep still running on stale numbers. Almost nobody gets the transmission relearn that Chrysler put in a bulletin. Behind a lot of these engines sits an 8-speed, and it learns like your engine computer does. Over years, it builds adaptive values controlling how fast each clutch fills and how hard it grabs. Add worn fluid and lazy habits, and those numbers drift into clumsy shifts. Now for the myth that costs people whole weekends. But pulling the battery cable doesn't reset any of it, whatever the forums tell you. Chrysler's bulletin lists exactly 3 ways those cells go back to 0. A scan tool wipes them, a new control module arrives blank, or a fresh gearbox does. And your battery cable isn't one of them. So what's the real procedure? Bulletin 21-030-14 lays out a scan tool quick learn for the 845RE, the 8-speed under Ram 1500s and Grand Cherokees. A shop warms the gearbox to at least 55 degrees Celsius, plugs in the factory tool, and runs the routine in 2 to 5 minutes. Chrysler books that whole job at 0.4 of an hour. So roughly 25 minutes of labor hands back the crisp shifts you last felt years ago. Wranglers run a different 8-speed, though the learning works the same way. And the cheapest fix on this engine isn't in any bulletin at all. It's whichever gas station you pulled into this morning. Quick pause. If you want your Jeep to last for hundreds of thousands of miles, I put everything you need in the 500,000-mile Jeep blueprint. It covers the maintenance, common problems, and expensive mistakes every Jeep owner should know. Grab your copy in the link below. Your fuel brand matters more here because this engine is port injected. This is where almost every video gets it wrong. Modern engines mostly use direct injection, which sprays fuel straight into the cylinder and leaves the back of the intake valve dry and crusted with carbon. So owners of those engines pay shops to blast walnut shells through the intake. But your Pentastar doesn't work that way. Its injectors spray at the back of the intake valve, so every drop of gasoline washes that valve on the way in. So you don't need walnut blasting or a $1,000 carbon cleaning service. Any shop selling you one is selling a fix for somebody else's engine. AAA ran an independent lab test in 2016, and after 4,000 miles of testing, non-top-tier gasoline left about 660 milligrams of deposits on each intake valve, and top-tier fuel left 34. So that's 19 times the gunk on the surface fuel is meant to wash. What does that protection cost you? AAA priced the difference at 3 cents a gallon on average. And 3 cents is nothing next to the $10 mistake waiting at a parts counter. Getting your coolant wrong wrecks this engine faster than bad oil does. Trucks from 2011 and 2012 ran HOAT coolant to spec MS9769, rated for about 5 years or 100,000 miles. In 2013, it became OAT coolant, first under spec MS-12106, and later renumbered MS-90032, good for 10 years or 150,000 miles. And color won't save you here. Mopar's old HOAT is orange, while the newer OAT is purple. But aftermarket bottles ignore that rule completely, so you read the spec number, never the bottle. Chrysler's own bulletin 07-005-12 says flatly that these chemistries don't mix. Mix them anyway, and the additives fall out of solution. The result is a jelly-like sludge that plugs the radiator and heater core, then chews through the seal in your water pump. So a $10 shortcut turns into a full flush plus a pump. What does everyone skip after a refill? They skip the bleed, and trapped air makes the gauge lie, so your Jeep can overheat while the needle reads normal. If you've ever poured a jug of antifreeze without reading the spec line, hit subscribe, because the next part costs less than that jug, and it's the reason your seals are still dry. One cheap part, your PCV valve, is saving every gasket you own. Bolted to the back of the passenger side valve cover, the PCV valve does exactly one job. It lets pressure escape from inside your crankcase. Every engine builds pressure down there, and it has to leave somewhere. Mopar's updated valve is 68083-202AC. On 2011 and 2012 builds, it goes in with a new hose, because the redesign dropped from 3 screws to 2. Let that valve clog, and the pressure stops leaving through the valve. So it pushes out through whatever's weakest. That means your gaskets, your front seal, and eventually the rear main seal. That same pressure then shoves oil past worn valve stem seals and into the intake, so the engine starts burning oil. Now you're adding a quart between changes, and the owner assumes worn piston rings and starts pricing a rebuild. So how much did that rebuild quote actually need to be? It needed a 20-minute job with a cheap valve, done years earlier. But the leak that empties your wallet fastest isn't coming from a gasket at all. It's dripping out of a piece of plastic sitting in the hottest part of your engine. Then the oil filter housing starts leaking your money onto the exhaust. Your oil filter housing lives in the valley between the heads, and it's plastic, with the oil cooler built inside. Now that plastic sits in the hottest spot on the engine, heating and cooling thousands of times, until it warps and splits. And plastic always loses that fight. When it goes, oil runs down the back of the block and drips onto your exhaust, which means the smell arrives before the puddle does. Plenty of owners take that to a shop and get quoted for a rear main seal, a far bigger job. The nastier version is coolant and oil mixing, because both fluids share that housing. Ever seen milky sludge on a dipstick and assumed head gasket? On a Pentastar, this plastic housing is the first suspect, not the last. One independent shop replaced a bad rocker arm, the seals, and this housing together, and closed the whole ticket at under $900. Another owner let his go on a road trip and paid $1,500. So the smarter move is skipping plastic entirely. Dorman sells an aluminum housing, part number 926-959, and it ships with the cooler, filter, cap, and gaskets. Read the box though, because the sensors aren't in there. Your intake manifold has to come off to reach it, which is nearly all the labor on that bill. So that's your one chance to knock out a second job for almost nothing. With that intake off, spark plugs are almost a free repair now. Your plugs. live under that manifold too. So a shop charging $300 in labor later is charging you for work you already paid for. Do both together, and the second one is free. The factory plug is a Champion Iridium RER8ZWYCB4, gapped at 0.043 of an inch. Your manual says 102,000 miles, but plenty of techs pull them at 60,000 to 90,000 and find the electrodes rounded off and lazy. The Pentastar was Chrysler's first engine to use 12mm plugs instead of the old 14mm kind. So what happens when a shop leans on that wrench? That metal shell stretches, it stops moving heat properly, and you get pre-ignition damage out of a routine tune-up. 13 foot-pounds with a torque wrench isn't a suggestion. Each plug also carries its own coil on top. When the valve cover seals wear out, oil seeps into the spark plug wells and pools around those coils. So the coil drowns, the cylinder misfires, and the owner buys new coils that die the same way. Pull one plug, find a well full of oil, and there's your real problem. But while that valve cover is off, listen, because the noise underneath it is the one that ends engines. Now those rocker arms are ticking, and a lawsuit says why. So owners call it the Pentastar tick. It starts as a light sewing machine rattle at idle on the driver's side, and it often fades once the lash adjusters pump up, so people hear it, shrug, and decide their Jeep just sounds like that. Inside each head, every valve gets pushed open by a roller finger follower, which is a small arm riding on a tiny roller bearing. That bearing needs clean oil to keep spinning. Feed it cooked, gritty oil, and the roller stops turning, wears flat, and starts shaving itself into your engine. The driver's side usually goes first, because that bank runs hotter and gets its oil slightly later. Have you noticed the tick almost always starts on that side? And that's the same reason your oil interval matters. Catch it early, and you're only replacing rockers and lash adjusters. Ignore it, and you're into camshaft territory, where people stop repairing and start shopping for used engines. A federal class action filed in Delaware in 2022, Mogan against FCA, puts those exact rocker arms at the center of it. Its lead plaintiff says he paid $1,700 plus $500 in rentals, and the complaint alleges Chrysler knew by 2013, kept selling the design, then handed dealers replacement rockers built to the same drawing. So the fix, they say, was the failure. That isn't the first time this company and its owners have disagreed about whose fault the engine is. The left cylinder head is where Chrysler and its owners stopped agreeing. From 2011 to 2013, some of these engines developed a fault in the left cylinder head, usually showing up on cylinder 2. Those valve seats and guides wore early, valves stopped sealing, and owners got misfires, a loud tick, and lost power on the highway. So how common was it? Doug Betts, Chrysler's quality chief, told Automotive News it hit about 0.5% of the engines built. That's 1 in every 200, or roughly 7,500 engines. The explanation is where owners still get angry. Remember that jug of cheap oil and that tank of cheap gas? Chrysler pointed at drive cycle and fuel quality, meaning how you drive and where you fill up. Later class actions allege the automaker leaned on that same reasoning, denying coverage by blaming outside factors or owner misuse. Even so, the company did extend coverage. Warranty Bulletin D-14-12, dated June 2014, stretched the left head warranty to 10 years or 150,000 miles. But the engine was never recalled, whatever the internet tells you. The one huge recall on this family, 14V634, covered alternators on 435,000 Chryslers, Dodges, and Grand Cherokees, and not one Wrangler was on that list. So Chrysler blamed maintenance, owners blamed the factory, and the numbers land in between. Meanwhile, IC Cars puts the average Wrangler at about 136,000 miles, with roughly 9% of them reaching 200,000. And the ones that get there aren't lucky. They're the ones whose owners changed the oil early, used the right antifreeze, and fixed the cheap parts before those parts took out the $4,000 ones. So, which of these have you already done to your Pentastar, and which one have you been putting off? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to keep your Jeep running for hundreds of thousands of miles, grab the 500,000-mile Jeep blueprint through the link below. Subscribe for more Jeep tips and click the video on screen right now for the next thing every Jeep owner needs to know. I'll see you there.